Welcome back, or welcome to the Tiny Shifts podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nunn. Each week, I break down a core idea on philosophy, mindset, how to think differently, challenge your perspective, and hopefully change sort of the way that you see the world. This is part of the Wonderfully Uncomfortable series. So it's a 4-part series where I sort of break down how we can do hard things. Something that I know has become such a big part of my life, and I think it's really important. I talk to people on stage. My 2 keynotes are pretty much about this. So one of them is Wonderfully Uncomfortable, which is how do we get joy and find that awe in everyday life? How do we strive for the things that make us human, whether that's artistic pursuits, creative, physical, mental, learning new things, going out in nature, getting that experience that sort of makes us human. And then my other talk is about minding the gap. So it's all about how do you make better decisions under uncertainty and pressure. And both of them are very similar in that sort of approach. They both contain the same things. And because I think they're just so important. They overlap so well. So this sort of stuff that I talk about doesn't just help in your personal life, doing creative stuff, in your professional life. It helps everything, every area of your life. If you become someone who can go out and do these hard things in life, it helps you in your workplace, it helps you in your family, it helps you manage your mindset, your mental health. And I think it's just so important. So thank you if you've listened to the first episode, which was about finding your why and your values. I hope you did the exercises, or you've at least watched the Mark Manson podcast, look at some of the Brené Brown stuff I added, and really took that on, because I think the value stuff is just so important. It's a great sort of foundation to sort of understand what to do next. So in this episode, part 2, I'm going to be breaking down basically our goals that we set. We all set goals, right? Well, most of us. But sometimes they're hypothetical goals, or they're just goals that we just think, I would like to do this. I would like to do that. And the problem is most goals don't work. Think about this. Why can't we do the things that we know what we should be doing? Think about if you have a goal, I'd be like, I just want to lose some weight, or I want to run this, or maybe you want to get a promotion at work. At the start of the year, we have these New Year's resolutions, and the research is pretty poor. About 90% of us fail our goals by the end of January. 90% give up on our goals. It's kind of wild when you think about it. So what is it about goal setting that doesn't work? So in this episode, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to go over the history of goal setting. I'm going to look at how to actually use goals properly in your life, how to take a goal and work towards it. And what should we actually be aiming for is the important thing. And then I'm going to talk about, does goal setting actually work? If we have an outcome, is that the thing that we always want to be striving for? Why most goals actually fail in real life, some of the problems that we face as individuals. Then I'm going to go over a framework that I sort of use. And this enables me to have long-term goals, short-term, and the sort of execution goals that I work in the sort of immediate 90-day sort of time frame, 2 weeks, 1 week. And then I'm going to talk about how I'm using this sort of system to sort of, I use it in different areas of my life. We'll cover that. But how I'm using this for the very specific sort of system. So I have my 5-year sort of adventure goals that I want to try and achieve, my 3-year. And then currently I'm ultra focused down on the 90-day sort of focus of what my outcomes that I want for the event of UTA. And then I'm going to give you all of this, how this applies outside of obviously the running sort of concept or the running ideas that I'm sort of, or that I'm talking about today. So let's start with the history of goal setting. Now, when you go all the way back and you look at some of the goals, we were Aristotle, Seneca, all these sort of types of people, they're sitting around just thinking about setting goals in the future. And there isn't a huge amount of evidence that they didn't have the systems to just sort out goals. It was more of a modern day sort of theory that come to in the workplace. It was born out of management and business. And it was around about the 1950s that it became quite popular. And there was a lot of research that was done. I think some of the initial research was with Locke and Lotham, I believe. Latham, that's it. And his was the theories that they sort of come up. It just needs to be specific and challenging and just work towards those. And if you just had a vague goal, and the people who had the specific and challenging goal and it sort of challenged and performed better. That was essentially what the research showed. Then there was some more research in the 80s by you. This will be the one that you're probably all aware of. This is by George T. Duran, and he created the SMART goal framework. And there's some real use in the SMART goal. It's something that I still use within my bigger framework, but it's very simple. So it's be specific. If you haven't heard this, I'm sure you have. Most people have. If you've had a job, they normally go through this sort of process. So be specific on your goals. So you don't want to just say, I want to run, or I want to run UTMB, or I want to lose weight. You don't just say, I want to lose weight. It needs to be like, I want to lose weight. I want to lose 10 kilos in X number of days or by this date, or I want to run UTMB in 25 hours, 20 minutes. I want to, you get the drift. And then what I want you to think now is it measurable? Can you measure this goal? Think about that. And some of them are pretty easy, like losing weight. Yes, you can. You can weigh yourself every day. Not saying you should do that, but you can. It needs to be something that you can have measures and you can have like sort of KPIs, performance indicators, key performance indicators. So you can say, if I do this and I do that, I'm going to have this outcome. Is it achievable? Now, this is an interesting one because obviously we're limited by a lot of our beliefs. I like pushing beyond what I think might be achievable. I ran I attempted dragging back in September after coming back from an injury and not running very much for a few months. Did I think it was achievable? No. I thought the percentages were really low. I actually shocked myself to make it to the final day, do like 200 miles in 5 days. It was kind of wild. I didn't expect to get that far. So to say it was achievable, now I'm like, okay, what else? So sometimes I think pushing beyond, you don't want to go too crazy. You don't want to be like, I'm going to be a king. Of course it's ridiculous. It needs to be something that someone has achieved with your sort of capabilities, your skills, and wherever you are in life. Then relevant. So relevant is an important one, and often people miss that one. Is it aligned with your core values and what you care about? And people miss that one out. They're just like, I'll be specific. And then they forget the other ones that are really important. The other one is time-based. So time is really important. You don't want to be too vague. You don't want to be like, I'm going to do it in sometime in the future. It needs to be like, no, by 6th of October, I'm going to do this. And that creates like a clear deadline. So SMART goals, really important. Go through the process, make sure it aligns with your values at the time, and then make sure it's, it is achievable. It's not just made up. You're not going to go to Mars and start a colony on there. Well, maybe you are, but whatever it is. So all I'm saying is this is really important stuff. The thing is that the reason why a lot of these goals we still fail, and for starters, we don't go through the process. We don't sit there and break down our goal clear enough and make it specific enough. And then we don't go through the SMART process. I think if you go through the SMART process alone, you'll see better results in your goals. But there's other factors in play. A lot of the research that was done into this that showed that goals are really important was done in strict sense. We forget the mess of life, the unpredictable nature of the world that we live in, the emotions, the roadblocks that come up, the things that just change in an instant that we just don't have control of. It's really important to sort of recognize that. Become aware of that. And we're going to work through this today, and we're going to see whether goal setting actually works. I know I've mentioned just then it does, but it's conditional, isn't it? I think the important thing to remember, goals work when the task is really clear, when it's really specific. Okay. The more specific you can get, the more chance you have of a clear outcome. And I don't mean just to be like, you don't want to be tied too much to the outcome, if that makes sense. We're going to go into that shortly. The next part is feedback. Are you getting constant feedback on that you're actually progressing your goal? At what moment do you realize whether the goal is going to happen or not? So for instance, for running, I'm continually training every single week. I do workouts, I do longer runs, I can track my heart rate, I can track loads of metrics. I can see the progression that I'm working towards my goal. But again, it has to be realistic. So for instance, I've been injured. I've been coming back from an injury. And sometimes it's hard to look at what I was training last year compared to now. I'm nearly doing half the amount, but I have to be realistic with it. What position am I in right now? What's achievable? What behaviors are going to get me to the start line in the best possible condition? And that is important. Okay. So why do goals fail? I think is an important place to sort of start, because 90% of goals fail at the beginning. You know, we give up as soon as motivation dies, we sort of give up on it. And a lot of it's because it's just an outcome focused goal. Outcome focused goal. So just let me clarify what that is. You say you want to lose weight. Okay, so your goal is, I want to lose weight. Or maybe it is, you say, oh no, I need to be specific. So you just say, I want to lose 5 kilos. Okay. By that date. But then what happens then is you're still the same person as you were before that put on the 5 kilos. You need to go, okay, what type of person is it that loses 5 kilos in this day? You know, for who's the type of person who does this? Or if I want to do a 24-hour UTA, 100 miles, I'll be like, okay, what type of person, what behaviors, what mindset, what daily actions are they taking? How do they respond when obstacles come up? You know, when they're getting towards the end of an workout and they just want to quit, how does that person respond? How do they think in those moments? And often, you know, that's a great way to sort of think about it. And most of our goals are just motivation dependent. We start with all this excitement, we read stuff, and I do this all the time. You know, you have this goal in mind and you're like, okay, I'm going to get the app, I'm going to follow this structure, I'm going to do the event, I'm going to do this. And you see how really motivating, you're excited to do it. But when that sort of, the novelty dwindles and the novelty goes away, we sort of lose that motivation. It's very hard to get that behavior. So we're going to talk today about how do we overcome that? How do we stop that? And we only plan for the best outcome. So when we do these SMART goals, we get specific, measurable, and we have all our KPIs of, you know, the best things, but we don't go, what happens? What could go wrong? We don't plan for that. And that's an important aspect of goal setting. It's like, what are the fears that are going to come in? You know, what are the potential roadblocks? What are the obstacles that are going to come into play? And once you start thinking like that, then you have the ability to sort of bounce back much quicker. Realize that once you stop doing it for today, it doesn't mean that you've failed. It just means you need to readjust. You need to change. So the important thing, I think, to remember right now, goals and outcome right now, if you just see, I'm going to do this and this is the only way of doing it. So if I'm going to lose 5 kilos and that's it, what happens when you slip up and that date? Remember, the goal isn't just the end point in life. It should be a rough direction. Okay. The compass direction. It's going to go in that, that's the way that you're headed. It's not the be all and end all. So you need to be able to adjust. You need to hold the outcome quite lightly. So then you could be like, okay, well, obviously the last couple of weeks hasn't been the best. I've eaten pizza every night. I've actually gained weight. Maybe I need to readjust my sort of goals and, adjust. And this constant readjustment can enable you to make big changes and get to the destination where you want. I think the best analogy I've heard for this is like planes. They're often always off course when they go into a destination, and these constant readjustments in the end get them to where they need to be. I might have just butchered that one, but that makes sense. Okay. So the idea of this goal set today is to think about not just the actual goals, about what the behaviors are involved to execute this. Okay. What's the mindset? How does this person think? What does the person who is achieving the thing you do, what do they read? What information do they take in? All these sorts of things you want to start thinking about. And then it enables you to sort of work towards that. So my framework that I use is I split things down. So first of all, I call it it's my sort of long-term goal setting framework. And it's about the person who I want to become. So first of all, I did a 5-year goal. Some people do 10. I like to do 5. And 5-year goal isn't ultra specific. I do with this, it'll be like outcome goals. So it'll be like, let's think of running, for instance. Some big trails that I want to do. I've looked at some long trails, the Australian Alpine Walking Track, the Great North Run, trails in New Zealand, some big adventures that I've sort of have. I'll have this, but then I'll do this for different areas. So I'll just be running, it'll be health. Be like, I want to be lean in 5 years' time when I'm 45. I still want to be fast. I want to be able to probably run a sub 40 10K at 45. I want to be able to run a sub 3-hour marathon at 45 still. And then I can think of other things like family goals. What do I want my house to be like? What car do I want? What do I want for my daughter? What do I want for my wife? All these sorts of things I can sort of work towards. And I put them into different categories, which we'll go over later on. But I sort of I just think about what I would like in my life, and I sort of picture and I go into detail. And this is a journaling process. I just write about it. And then I think about what would the person in that situation need to think? What would they need to learn? What would this person have learned in the last 5 years to get to that point? What skills would they have gained? What mindset would they need? What beliefs would they hold? What values would they have? And often I make sure it aligns with my current values, because if I'm thinking of someone who doesn't really align with me because it sounds good, then I realize that I'm misaligned somewhere. I'm trying to think about things that aren't actually things that I want. I'm thinking society is telling me that I need them. So that's a really good point. You go through this process, and as this one before, this will be all available in a workbook afterwards. So once you've got this big picture goal of 5 years, you have it out. And often I recommend, you don't need to read this one quite often. It's good to just have it in a note. So I have it in a note in my Apple Notes. So I just use Apple Notes for all this stuff. And I just have a breakdown of the different categories of what I want in finance, in health, all this sort of stuff. And I build up the perfect sort of picture of how I see things, and again, these are sort of loose, they're not, I'm not tying my identity to whether I get this. I don't see it as a failure if I don't succeed. It just gives me a general direction of where I want to head in my life. And it's quite fun. I get to go, okay, well, I want to go to these dive spots in the world. I want to go and have these experiences. I want to do this. I want to learn these skills. And it just enables me to have a sort of understanding of the person I'm becoming and what I'm doing on a daily basis. So then I go to 3 years, and this is more, again, I start working back from 5 years to 3 years, and I go, okay, what benchmarks, if I'm going to be on track for my 5 years, then what would I need to have done in 3 years? What would this person need to have achieved? And I just work my way back, and I start with my 5 years, and I look down and underneath it, and I say, well, by 3 years, I probably would have done this. So imagine my long trails, I probably would have done UTMB 100-mile race. I would have done several 100-mile races in different areas of the world. I would have done maybe some longer day stuff by myself, some FKT attempts, all this sort of stuff. That's for my running. Let's say for my speaking business, if my 5-year goal is to maybe deliver 50 talks globally. Okay, I have a podcast channel with the X number of followers. I'm speaking in schools. All these sorts of things. I'm just making this up as I go. But, so these are some of the ideas that I've had. Sharing this idea, creating a framework that I can help young people to sort of get a better idea of the direction they want in their life, how to go out, do hard things, how to get away from the drawer of the computer screens and the phones in their pockets and go and engage with life and experience, nature and things like this. How can I get people to go out there and really love this stuff? Well, then I would break down, 3 years, it means that I'm already working in schools. I've got a talk that I deliver. Then I would go back. And once I've done this, I would just say I've done 50 schools, or if it's the 50 talks around the world globally, it'll be like, okay, well, this year, maybe I'm only doing 10, but I'm working for some big clients. Sometimes I write down clients that I want to talk with or I want to speak to. And I'll be like, okay, well, that's a goal. I want to work for this client or that client. And I've done this before in my sort of magic career. So I had a 5-year goal in my magic career where I wanted to be, and I achieved it. And I was really excited. And I reached it. And then I was like, okay, now I'm going to be a speaker. And that was my next 5-year goal. So I've gone through this process. Once I reached it, I ended up just moving on to the next one. So finally, or the next 2 steps, you go down to a year. So in the next 12 months, so at the start of the year, I go, right, what am I going to do in the next 12 months to work me towards my 3-year goal, my 5-year goal? And I sort of readjust every year depending on how fast things are going. So for instance, my 1-year goal was speaking. I wanted to do 20 speaking gigs this year, this year in 2026. The crazy thing is I've already done that. Okay. So I'm going to have to readjust, aren't I? Because I need to have that drive. I've moved it to 50. So I want to do 50 speaking gigs by the end of the year. Huge goal, but I'm quite confident I'm going to do it now. Maybe I need to do more, but I'm going to do this. There's other things I needed to do. I wanted to make sure that I'm becoming, my long-term goal is to become one of the best speakers. Okay. Now that's subjective, of course. But I'm like, what does the best speaker do? Well, they get help. They don't do it alone. They don't think that they can just be a speaker and they're the best. No, they get training. So I've worked with a consultant. Okay. I invested in myself. What else have they done? They build connections. They start crafting these ideas. They write a book. So I'm writing a book. All these sorts of things are and they start a podcast. Here we are. So this is my sort of journey that I've gone through, and this is what I'm doing. This is the daily actions. Then we go down to 90 days. So remember, we go 15, 3, 1, then we do 90 days. So this is the execution phase. These are where you break down the daily behaviors that you need to do. So think about it. So for my podcast or my speaking business and building my brand, what are the daily actions that I need to do? So let's break them down into small parts. So first of all, rehearsal. If I'm going to become a good speaker, I need to have a keynote that I'm delivering that is of premium quality, basically. I want to be a speaker that people remember. So I'm rehearsing, I'm trying to get the lines, I'm trying to get the pacing, I'm doing different structures, I'm trying to make sure the flow works really nicely. The transition is great. I know all my slides, everything looks visually really great. Everything's unique. They're not going to see in other areas. I'm constantly refining this and trying to get better. Okay. But these daily skills, I need to be very specific. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to rehearse and go through my lines at least 15 minutes a day. It's not a huge goal. I'm not going to be overwhelming myself too much. Then I'd be like, okay, well, I need to get this many leads. So I need to do this much ads. I need to, work out how much I need to spend on the ads. Okay. What do I want to do with that? Hired an assistant to assist me so I could help grow my business. I've got this podcast studio to look more professional for my clients. I've now got an office, a workspace that I'm working in. These sort of things that, these behaviors that I'm actually progressing at a faster rate than what I imagined, but these are just the next progression. Now think about a creative pursuit. Maybe your 5-year goal is to be a full-time artist. Okay. You've got a piece of art in a gallery that's up there and it's yours. Maybe your 3-year goal to get to that point, you have to put on your own exhibition. Maybe 1-year goal then is that you are painting nearly every single day. You have been selling some of your art online. Go back to 90-day goals is the execution phase. What behaviors are we doing? So the next 13 weeks, what are you doing each day? So think about it. You're dedicating a time to create, to do art. then maybe you're building connections. You go to galleries, you go to see exhibitions, you're joining groups, you're connecting with people, all these sorts of things. These are the behaviors that you do in the instant, but you don't need to think about them at the 5-year goal, but these are the behaviors that people do. But you would start with your 5-year goal. What is somebody who's an artist? What are they thinking, doing? What have they content, what information have they put into their heads? All this sorts of stuff can enable you to sort of backtrack all the way through, sort of work out what you need to do today. And you can do that with anything. So maybe it's in 5 years, you want to be able to run a marathon. Okay, well, backtrack from that. But the minute you don't run, well, first of all, you need to become a runner. Okay, but you'd go for the 3-year, maybe by then you've done a few halves. 1 year, you're doing your first half, maybe you've done some park runs, and then 90 days, you're just trying to learn how to do 2 or 3 days of exercise a week, get that consistency, going to the gym, building up that long-term strength. And bear in mind, I'm saying right now, marathon 5 years. I think that's a more realistic goal. Most people just go from 0 running to try and run a marathon and then never run again. And they wonder why. So remember the 5-year goals. It's not what do I want. It's basically the key idea of this. Who do I want to become? Who do I want to become? And so think about this and break it into behavior, mindset, fitness, the health of this person, what they're going to learn, and then the inputs for this. So what they consume, what information, what books are they reading, what podcasts are they listening to, what Instagram people are they following, whatever it is, what news are they putting into their minds. Think about all this stuff, and then you can backtrack from there. So the 5-year one is quite fun. It sort of breaks down who you want to be and how you want to sort of look at yourself. And when I did this initially, I remember doing this like 10 years ago, and a big obstacle in my life and was alcohol. I was causing so much problems with it. A lot of my bandwidth was taken up from that. And it was like, okay, I want to either not drink or drink less. But it was so hard for me to sort of get into some of my bigger goals because that was just holding me back. So think about this sometimes. There is sometimes a behavior, a habit that might be holding a lot of your goals back. What is this habit that you could sort of try and break or overcome? And that should be one of your big focus. Maybe that's your 90-day focus, your 1 year, your 3 years, your 5 years, and that can sort of help. But another thing to clarify, which I haven't brought up, these aren't mystical thinking. I think there's things like this process I'm going in right now, it requires action, massive amounts of action. Rhonda Burns, who's talking about The Secret, writing wish lists, the universe, this wishful thinking creates like some little fairy comes in and gives you a Porsche. I'm talking about getting uncomfortable, doing massive action, doing hard work, and failing, getting back up, doing it again, struggling, wanting to give up, starting again, doing it again. It's a messy process. This is part of goal setting. This is part of this 5-year journey. That's why I do the 5-year. You can readjust the 90 days all the time. Some of it works. You go faster, you go slower. Some of it seems impossible. Some of you need to scrap and just start again. But just keep doing this process. It's kind of fun. And it's unbelievable, right? I don't believe in The Secret, but some of the stuff, I've been doing this now for probably about 8 years. Some of the stuff that's come true is mind-boggling for me. Like, I've been ultra specific. I had stuff about like where I was going to get married, what I was going to do, what I was going to do as a job, numbers of money I was going to make, where I was going to live, what environment my house was going to look like, all this sort of stuff. And a lot of these sort of stuff come true. Obviously, a lot of it's just because I can match it now. Loads of the stuff that I had that didn't come true, I'm not really linking. But I had a sort of vision. I had a direction I wanted to aim in, and I sort of created that. And we all have that power. We have that power to create that version of ourselves. But it's all about taking the future, because remember, the past is a thought. The future, just a thought. None of them exist. The only thing that really matters is within these moments. Okay, what can we do in this moment? That is what you can decide. And this is about that. So you take everything, all your thoughts or your actions, your behaviors, what you want to learn, so you can decide what you're going to do today. How are you going to start? How are you going to get on this? So let's go about this. So again, that was covering 5 years. The 3-year goals is about your capabilities. So what needs to be true by this point in order for you to succeed towards your 5-year goal? What levels are you reaching? So it's basically like a sort of benchmark, because 5 years can seem quite far away. The 1-year goal just helps to do at the start of each year, what matters this year, what I'm going to do. And again, you break them down into the categories. 90-day goals is all about execution. This is the bit where you really go down to individual behaviors that you do every single day. So it's where it becomes real. You're like, this is what I'm doing. I need to read this. I need to be trying to consume this information. I need to learn this. I need to allocate an hour a week doing this, or an hour a day, or whatever it is. And it goes from this goals, which seems like something that's just in the future, to something that, what can you repeat every single day? What can you do every single day to work towards that goal? What behaviors create that result? What mindsets, what thoughts, what beliefs, what information can get you to that result? So this is all about the philosophy of this 1% approach. It's about breaking things down into the smallest possible action. And it can be fun. It can also be hard. And I think it's an important thing to sort of clarify with this, because I know some people see these goals and they when they go through goal setting, it's very uncomfortable, because you have this sort of realization that you're not living the sort of life that you want to be in. You're trying to impress people around you. You're trying to impress the wrong people. But remember this, and this is important. There's only 2 people in your life you need to impress. Not your wife, or maybe your wife, not your kids, not your family members, not your work colleagues or random followers that you've never met. The people you need to impress are these: your 8-year-old self and your 80-year-old self. You impress them too, and your life will be good. Okay, think about that. Your 8-year-old self and your 80-year-old self. What would your 8-year-old self want you to be doing right now? What did they love? What did they enjoy? What was the wonder of the world? They were so innocent the way they looked at the world. What was it they were thinking of? And your 80-year-old self, imagine they looked back on your life, and then they could see of all the things that you did and all the things that you didn't do. What would the regrets be? What would they be proud of? Think about that. Such an important factor. I always think about this. It's like the rocking chair test. I go back and imagine my 8-year-old self and think, what would my 8-year-old self, looking back on myself, think about my life, about the way I was living, the way I was showing up? And it can be really hard, because sometimes we're not living to that version of self that we want. I know for a long time I did. I had so much pain, so much suffering, so much struggle and shame that I carried around with addiction. Ruined my life for a long time. But to be honest, I wouldn't take any of it away, because I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for that. There's always a silver lining sometimes. But think about that. What would your 80-year-old self want from you today? And another thing that I like to reflect on is the 4,000 weeks. Oliver Berkman he talks about that we only have 4,000 weeks of our lives, which isn't really that many when you consider how many weeks we've already lived. And we put things off into this imaginary future. We postpone stuff. Well, I can't do this today. I'm not ready. I don't have what it takes. And I always get people coming up to me and they say this. They go, Andy, I really like what you talk about and you motivate, but I'm just not fearless like you. And I think the important thing to remember is I'm not fearless. I'm terrified. I'm scared. I'm anxious. I'm an anxious person. I have anxiety that's just there, and it's just part of me. And there's 2 types of fear that I want to talk about today, because I think the important thing is there's the loud screaming fear, the one that sort of tells you there's a lion in the bushes or there's a tiger shark over there. And you want to listen to that fear because that one keeps you alive. That's not the fear that lets you get through your goals that I'm talking about, or stops you from achieving your goals. That's not the one. The fear that I'm most concerned about is the one that's quiet, it whispers into your ear, and it tells you you're not enough. You're not capable of enough. Don't try these goals. You don't have time for it. Don't listen to this podcast. That's stupid. Andy doesn't know that I have such a difficult life. I'm not even going to try. Just stay safe. Stay secure in this moment. That's where it's safe. Stay here with me. Future, you might be able to do this, but not right now. That is the fear that I'm talking about, because we don't even call it fear. We call it being sensible, being reasonable, practical. That's the fear that I'm most concerned about. And I had an epiphany when I thought about this. It's this. We all want to be fearless, don't we? We all imagine a future version of ourselves, being super fearless, being able to achieve our goals, being able to do whatever we want. And the truth is, that causes so much pain and so much suffering. So much pain and so much suffering, because that future version of you, it never arrives. Never arrives. And you're telling yourself in that moment that you're just not good enough to even try, to even give it a shot, give it a go. Then I realized something. We all want to be fearless. We all want to be, trying to attack our goals. Imagine ourselves sort of doing this, but that never, ever comes to that point. It's just not how it works. There isn't a version of you that is fearless. Everyone's scared. I'm scared. You're scared. Everyone is scared. And it's not that these successful people that are achieving their goals feel less fear. It's that they don't see fear as a stop sign. They don't see fear and go, I can't do this. I'm just going to give up. They see fear and it's like, okay, well, they see it as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to sort of develop themselves. They build up that muscle where they haven't just resorted to just escaping from their fear all the time or escaping from discomfort. They've created the sort of discipline and the grit to double down when that discomfort arrives. So your goal shouldn't be to feel less fear. You should be questioning, obviously listen to the fear that protects your life. Question the fear that protects your comfort, because one of them is, keeping you living or keeping you alive. But the other one is stopping you from living, I guess is the best way to say that. So with this stuff, I think it's really, really important that you sort of understand what's holding you back from your goals and I want to talk about fear right now, because a big aspect from this, I think, from a lot of goal setting is that we don't align it. We don't think about the fears that come up and about the fears that do appear when we do have a goal. And one of the greatest TED Talks I saw on this was by Tim Ferriss. And I use his system. I'm going to put his podcast, his TED Talk in the show notes about fear setting. It's really, really incredible. And I use this and I break it down. So essentially what I tend to do is I look at imagine a race, for instance. I write down what are my fears, what is everything that could go wrong, essentially. And I write it down and write each and every single one. So imagine I have this UTA. I'll go through this process right now. I've failed at the race 3 times. So my fear is I fail. I have to DNF. Then think about my thoughts or actions that I can do to prevent that. So my thoughts will be, this is terrible, and then I have to catch these sort of beliefs that are, I'm not good enough, I have to let everyone down. Then I have to challenge it. Is that true? No, it's not. Most people don't mind if I fail. No one cares. The only person who really cares is myself. And the truth is, it's not the end of the world. It's still part of the process. It's good for the content. I can talk about it on the podcast. People probably listen if I fail and all those sorts of stuff. It's part of the hero's journey. People like that. And so that's another good thing to sort of look at. It makes me go, okay, if I fail, whatever. But then I can go, okay, what can I put in place to try and stop this from happening? What behaviors or actions can I do? I can have a clear plan. And this is what I would structure. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to eat this, I'm going to drink this, blah, blah, blah. And I have a clear plan of all the things that I'm going to do and all the things that I can control. Because remember, you can't control everything. If you can focus on what you can control, which are your behaviors and your thoughts and your actions, you can, that's only the best you could do. So next one will be, I don't know, fear terrible weather. Okay, what can I do? Make sure I have good gear. I don't go for the cheap stuff. I make sure for quality gear is going to keep me warm. It's going to be breathable. It's going to help me perform at my best. So I've got quality gear. Okay, mindset. What are my thoughts? This is terrible. Well, maybe what was if I change it to, but this is exciting. This is another type of adventure. I actually like really terrible weather. So it's one of my strengths. I know I'm going to perform probably better than most people in terrible weather just because I enjoy it. I'm a bit crazy. Just think of another one. So another fear is my nutrition I start being sick and I just can't stop. What are my thoughts in that moment are going to be like, well, it's the end of my race. I'm going to have to drop out. I'm an idiot. All these sort of things that could come up. So what are the things I can do to sort of prepare that? Well, first of all, is train my gut beforehand is an important thing. So make sure I'm eating nothing new on race day. There's things that I've trained with. Have a specific amount that I'm having each hour, not too much, not too little. So I have to play catch up. Make sure my effort is correct. And then making sure my hydration and things is in line. And then having some stomach sort of backup, some ginger juice. Pickle juice can work quite well if I've got cramps or just to reset the sort of nervous system. And also anything like that, Imodium for, what, and just think about those sort of things. So then I have that sort of structure and I go through every single thing that can possibly go wrong in the race. And I have a plan for it. So if anything comes up on race day, I have a plan, even for the moment I drop out. Okay? If I drop out, what am I going to do? Well, first of all, I'm going to stop and I'm going to reflect. I'm going to feel the emotion. Okay. Because I'm going to, first of all, feel terrible. I'm going to be upset. I'm going to creep in. It's going to be like I'm a failure. But then I can sit there and I can just talk to myself and realize I'm not, and I do this before I start. And I know some people go, well, you're predicting you're going to fail. And I'm like, no, I'm just looking at every single angle. And I've used this in magic. So even in magic in the performance, I think about what's the worst possible outcome. And it enables me to adapt in the moment. And it makes me, I think, be able to bounce back so fast, deal with failure. Okay. Because I'm already prepared for it. And that's it. I'm going to perform the best I possibly can on the day. And whether that's me dropping out or succeeding, either way, for me, it means I'm executing in the best possible way I can. And sometimes things come up that I didn't plan for, and that's just part of it. And I also think about that. What happens? Well, the mindset is, I didn't plan for this. Let's just adapt with all the other skills that I have. And the mindset is, I've got this. I do this. I'm confident. And you can do this in other areas of your life. And these are the sort of the way the fear setting works. It could be like a goal. What of all your fears that you're going to do? What are your thoughts that are going to come up? What are your beliefs about this? What actions can you do to sort of prepare yourself to sort of, and then once you do this, it gives you so much confidence in order to move forward and attack your goals. So again, I've spoken about how you can use this in different areas. I'm going to go over the quickly categories that I use. So I do this in my health, my family, my career, my personal growth, life adventure goals. And I think the important thing is this isn't about controlling every aspect of my life. Okay. This is the important thing I think I get from Oliver Berkman is that we have these 4,000 weeks that we have. Okay. And you can try and over control every single variable. But the truth is that over control gives you less control. If that makes sense. Sort of paradox. If we try and have too many to-do lists, too many systems, too much in place, it causes often things to sort of fall to pieces. So I often just try and do my best. A lot of this is like, yes, this is what I want. This is what behaviors I'm trying to do, but I don't put too much pressure on myself every single day to have to do it. So if I miss it, it's not the end of the world. And I create this mindset of just being like, okay, so it means that I'm somebody who meditates, but it doesn't mean I have to do it every single day, you know, and that's okay. I'm only human. It means also I don't give up. I'm a runner, and I like to run most days, nearly every day, but also I try and listen to my body. I realized that in this process, I was struggling. I've got a coach. I'm okay for asking for help. So yes, set these goals. Yes, have a structure, have behaviors that you want to do, but also realize, be willing to ask for help. You don't need to do this alone. Be open-minded that you might have to change everything. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to do it every single day, and just have fun with it. I think that's the key. We can be too serious about this, and we can just play with these goals. Have some fun ones. Make them a bit more exciting. You know, what are the things that you want to learn? What are the books that you've wanted to read? You know, where are the places you wanted to go? You know, I have some exciting stuff that I want to get into photography. I want to nature photography, thinking about taking pictures of whales and, you know, nature and birds and learning more about nature. You know, this sort of process is quite exciting to me. I'm trying to think about other things that I want to do. I went through a period where I was learning a lot of chess, and I was learning chess openings, and, you know, and that motivation from that sort of died out a little bit. And I've gone into other things. Have a play with this. It's a lot of fun. And I think just to reflect, remember the 5-year goal is a direction. It's a rough direction. It's like a compass. It's not, this is what needs to happen. Okay. The 1 year is what you focus on. Okay. It's what you're focusing on this year. 90 days is all about execution. So each 90 days you reset and you look towards the further goals. And every 90 days you can just readjust and you can sort of reflect and have this available in your notes. You can break it down. Again, I'm going to provide this in a notebook that's going to sort of help you. Something you can copy and paste to your notes. I'll give you a link so you can have it in your notes app, whichever one you use, and you can fill this in every 90 days. You can do your 5-year goal and the questions that you have. I hope this has been helpful. I know it's a lot to sort of take, and it does take a bit of work, but it's an important process. You know, I think personally, it sort of motivates me. It gives me purpose and meaning to work towards these things. Gets me quite excited with it as well, especially now. A lot of mine have changed because, you know, big motivator of mine is becoming a father. You know, I see my daughter now and I'm like, oh, everything I do now is attached to wanting the best outcome for her. You know, I want to be a good father. I want to be a good person. I want to be a good role model. I want her to see that I can do hard things and it's okay to fail and be silly, and, you know, have fun and, you know, live a bit of a free spirit life. And I want her to feel that she can be whoever she wants to be. And also that means relationships, you know, that I'm being a good partner. And what does that look like with other goals? You know, making sure that, yeah, I have these crazy running goals and stuff, but does that align with the family? And, you know, there can be sort of conflict there, and you need to sort of adjust these sort of goals. And I think that's important. You know, you can have these bigger pictures, but who else is involved in it? Bring them in with your goals, talk through with them. Like, how can we make this work together? You know, I really want to do this. Are you on board with this? How can we make this work? What happens if it fails? You know, if your goal is to start a new career, a new job, and it doesn't necessarily work out, do you have a backup plan? You know, and things like this. And I think it's so important. So thank you again for listening to this. It's been really great. Again, please subscribe if you've listened to this. It helps a lot grow this channel. And please share it with anyone who you think will find this really helpful. This is the funny thing is these episodes are part of the workshop that I do with clients that pay a lot of money for this. So I'm providing this because I think it's important. I think it's important for everyone to sort of have these things that I've sort of worked on and developed and sort of learned over the years and adapted with myself. And I live it, you know, from where I was 10 years ago to who I am today is part of all this process. It's part of all these experiences that I've had, that I've learned, the challenges that I've done, and the continual growth that I sort of look towards. And the fun that I have on the way, the idea that I'm just making all this up as I go along. And that's pretty awesome. It's pretty cool. I get to sit, who would have thought I'd be in a podcast studio talking to a bunch of people doing this? I could never have imagined it. Or maybe I could. I wish you all the best, everyone. I hope you guys are enjoying this. This is a different series. I know often we don't like doing work outside of, sort of podcasts and stuff like that. I hope this is really helpful. And if you're doing UTA, or you're doing some ultra marathon or some racing goals, please reach out. I'd love to chat, connect with you. Maybe we can meet at UTA. Wish you all the best on your goals. Remember, just do your best. These tiny sort of behaviors, decisions that we make can make a big impact over the long term. These tiny, tiny shifts. But thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.